Well, everyone says read. If you want to write, read.
Oh,
I
right. Yes.
strongly stand by that. That phase or that statement. But honestly, it's an exercise in patience and perseverance. I mean, things don't move quickly. There's a lot happening in the space. There's a lot of shift and change. You know, it's just publishing or horror is just kind of a smaller community, but there's a lot happening and a lot of things that are going on all the time. So, you know, if you don't get that first acceptance or you don't get that first, request from an agent or that first publisher, yes, like that is not even, I wouldn't even say it's normal. Like it's part of the process. Expect disappointment, expect rejection, and, you know, learn to be okay with that and keep pushing.
Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to Voices from the Mausoleum. In today's episode, I'm doing my very first filmmaker interview with Lindy Ryan. Lindy and I think connected on Twitter originally, and I think when I had posted about wanting to kind of branch out and talk to people who were doing more things with their books and other items in the horror world, she said she would be interested in coming on, and that's kind of how we ended up here. You do a lot, so I'm going to let you tell everybody what all the things are that you do.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm primarily a writer, so I write in the horror space. I'm an editor. I love editing anthologies. I have a very special weakness for anthologies.
Yeah.
But have recently kind of started to dabble a little bit in the filmmaker space and, produce my first film, doing some film writing and screenplay writing. Which is something I've done a little bit in the romance side of things, but not in horror. So it's been an interesting, shift to change that voice a little bit in the storytelling space for film and screen.
Yeah, cool. Well, thank you so much for taking time to be here. I really do appreciate it, and I'm really excited about what we're going to be talking about today.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, of course. So I have I'm just going to tell viewers this because I've done artist interviews in a different space as far as horror art, and so this is going to be kind of structured similarly. I have a couple of more things I want to ask to get to know you better and what you do a little bit better, and then we'll talk specifically about the story that we're going to be talking about today. So when you're writing or filmmaking or screenwriting, where do you think you draw like your inspiration? What are things that inspire you?
I don't think it's just one place. It's kind of everywhere. But I've realized recently that I have this trend of dredging up weird old memories and building entire worlds around them. So I think a lot of it comes from experience and from just moments that, move in and out of your life. And they're typically not even, not huge moments. They're this little weird dream or, this random little memory. And I think, it provides this sensory experience to grasp onto as a writer. And you pull in the memory, the smells, the sounds, the people, and all that starts to kind of inform the idea. And then the idea gets to do what it wants when it, becomes kind of sentient in your brain.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of that inspiration, really, I've noticed it's coming a lot from memory, which is kind of surprising to me.
Yeah.
But an interesting place to draw from.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, our memories make us who we are. So it's that's interesting, but it makes sense too, I think.
Yeah, I'm working on a new novel right now for my publisher, and the first chapter is based entirely off just this random 30-second memory from 5th grade, like this completely random thing that's now grown into this whole book that's completely unrelated. So how maybe that's just like this really twisted way my brain works.
Right.
But it's an interesting, exercise to kind of, and it's, I think, very centering. As a creative, it can be really easy to kind of get lost in ideas and in the muse. But when you draw from an internal well, I think there's like a different element that you bring to whatever you're working on.
Yeah.
Do you hope so? Because I'm in trouble if that's not the case.
Do you think that with it being like that, do you think that it helps focus? Like, because I know a lot of writers in general in the horror community that they do so many projects at one time. And then I hear people say all the time, like, I start this thing and then I do something else, and then I do something else. And then eventually I'll get back to this other thing that I started. Do you kind of suffer with that too, or?
Oh yeah, that's the curse, I think, of writers for sure. Like,
Okay.
you're supposed to be working on this one thing,
Right?
You're working on all of these other things.
Yeah.
So I think I don't know any writers who work on one project at a time. I think because your mind is competing for, there's very little real estate, at least for me up here, and it's always competing for story ideas or, for these inspirations that pop up. So, for me, when I draw so much from, experiences or memories, when I need to recenter myself back in that story, I go back to that core memory, and it's probably radically different on page than it is in my mind. But, it provides like a grounding place for me to go back to and remember what I was talking about.
Anyway. No, that makes sense. I think creatives in general, it's a hard headspace to just stay focused on one thing. Because even as a content creator, I'm always doing stuff, always coming up with things, pitching ideas, reaching out to people. And it doesn't matter that I have a video I need to edit for tomorrow, or like, it's just like you just ping pong like all over the place. So yeah, I definitely understand.
Yeah, it's not just one thing. I mean, writers don't just, unfortunately, we don't get to just sit in our cave and write. I mean, we have to do either like life things, or, interviews or, articles. So there's a lot of things that go on. So it can, that focus, like finding that creative headspace, I think is like a skill that has to be developed and honed and, worked on over time.
Yeah. You mentioned coming over from you've done some things with romance and then being in the horror world. Did you start in romance? Like, what does that journey look like from like where you started to like kind of where you're going?
That's funny. It's such a common question. Everyone asks like, and I honestly, I don't know anymore. Because my career has been so like full of twists and turns and restarts. I mean, I am an academic, I'm a professor by day, I guess. It's my alter ego. And I come from the world of nonfiction. I've written 2 textbooks. I'm currently updating a new edition of one of my textbooks. I do all of that nonfiction writing, which is a totally different world than fiction writing.
Sure. Yeah.
When I came into the kind of the fiction space, I started in historical. So I dabbled a lot in history because as a researcher, as an academic, researching made sense. And so, but I'm a horror girl at heart. I'm one of those that grew up cutting teeth on Goosebumps and Are You Afraid of the Dark and all those wonderful 90s things. And then like snuck my mom's Stephen King novels.
Sure.
Watched Alfred Hitchcock. And so when I started kind of in that historical space, which is not an easy sell and it's not an easy write. So it kind of took the joy a little bit out of it. Yeah. And so then I moved into the darker stuff, into writing horror, but believe it or not, the romance world moves a lot faster than the horror world.
I've heard that before. Yeah.
And this, not to upset any romance readers, but it's a little bit of a simpler story. There's a little bit more of a formula that you can work with when you're writing. Sure. I write book to screen romance. So I've written, films or, made for TV movie type things. And so there's a kind of specific craft to those. And so that again made logical sense to me. Coming from an academic background, like, I understand this formula. I understand these characters, their motivations with this plot. So I even though I started really working in horror and writing in horror and editing in horror earlier, a lot of romance I just came out faster. Horror moves a little bit, as a publishing world, moves a little bit more slowly.
Yeah, no, I've heard that before about romance in general, that it's just a different market, a different it's just very different. Yeah,
it's very different. Yeah, I mean, horror readers, we hold on to stuff. We treasure stuff and value stuff and get really passionate. We read the same books over and over and over again. We never let go of an author.
That's true.
We have a very different personality than I think like a romance reader or a Hallmark television viewer. They tend to be a little bit more they're just, they're there for the dopamine rush of the romance, right? And
Right.
you want to give a really great experience in romance, but it is a little bit more consumable, I think. Gosh,
Yeah.
I'm probably alienating like half of the reading community.
No, I know what you mean, though. I think, and it's not but there are plenty of people that are into both. It doesn't necessarily mean but yeah, no, I get what you're saying. I've heard that it moves faster, so that makes sense.
There's a surprising amount of people who are into both, like in all aspects. I know lots of other writers and screenwriters and producers who do really dark, gory slasher film, stuff, and then go over here and make the happily ever afters. And I think, it's balance. It's you can't live in the darkness all the time. So sometimes you peek out. If you want to peek out and like fill your happiness meter, there's no better way to do that than
that's true.
And you're filled, you're ready to go back to the dark.
That's true. Yeah, just like a break. Yeah, that's true. That's a good way to look at it. Yeah. Yeah. So just from all the different things that you've done, what is something, if you were to give like one piece of advice to people or anyone who may be struggling to like get into the world of writing or even filmmaking, like what is something that you think would be good for them to know or hear?
Oh my gosh. Well, everyone says read. If you want to write, read.
Right.
We stand by that. That phase or that statement. But honestly, it's an exercise in patience and perseverance. I mean, things don't move quickly. There's a lot happening in the space. There's a lot of shift and change. It's just publishing or horror is just kind of a smaller community, but there's a lot happening and a lot of things that are going on all the time. So, if you don't get that first acceptance or you don't get that first request from an agent or that first publisher, yes, that is not even, I wouldn't even say it's normal. Like it's part of the process. Expect disappointment, expect rejection, and learn to be okay with that and keep pushing, because I mean, we've all heard the stories about big famous authors who've been rejected a couple of dozen times before their book ever found a publisher. And so that's par for the course. So I think a lot of it is just keep working, keep, following that goal, and just know that it does take time.
Yeah.
And I am not a patient person. Like I am like I hate wait. Like I will, like if I don't have coffee in my mug in like 2 seconds from my machine, I'm like, oh my God, what is going on?
taking so long?
I don't have time for this. So me telling anyone to be patient is an absolute, comedy show, but it is true, unfortunately.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. I see people post all the time about like how many times they were rejected, and then it's like all of a sudden something really great happens because they just kept plugging away. Like they just kept trying, kept submitting, kept writing, rewriting, retrying, like all of that.
And those great moments are often by surprise.
Yeah.
And that makes them even more exciting. You just kind of train yourself to be like, all right, well, I'll hear back in 3 years. Right. And then if you prepare yourself for the worst, it's such like a depressing thing to say, like, just live your life in negative, then you'll be fine. But no, those quick surprises. I mean, I've been, in this world for years, and it's just been the past year or so that things have really started snowballing in an excellent way. And I'm now trying to keep up with the momentum of all of those things, where, in a year ago, I was in a very different place. So patience is a virtue, I guess. So,
Yeah. This kind of piggybacks off of this, but this is something I'm always fascinated to hear from people from all kinds of parts of like content creating, writing, filmmaking, art, anything. What is something that you heard advice wise that has really stuck with you, or that you still live by? Same thing.
Man, I don't think anything I can actually repeat out loud. Some of the stuff like
now I'm intrigued.
Yeah, like that's the after show. I think the words, one thing that stuck with me is it's not, writing or art, any type of art is craft. It's not innate. So you can always learn something new. You can always learn from something, from someone. You can, be better. You can grow. You can change. And I'm very much a perfectionist. I'm like, this is perfect. I can't touch it again. No one can touch it again, whatever.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
have to kind of learn to let that go. Like, it will never be perfect.
Yeah.
Someone will always have something to say, and you have to be kind of adaptable. So the other half of that, always be willing to learn and grow, is, find your ear for hearing criticism and for hearing feedback, and knowing how to process and digest that information. Sometimes, the mantra of don't go on Goodreads, for writers. Don't
yes. Yeah.
Like, yes, don't do that. Other times it's like, listen to what your readers are telling you, or listening to what your editors are telling you.
Yeah.
So it's a really interesting kind of relationship.
Yeah.
But you gotta nurture and take care of that like you do any other relationship. So that, is one piece of advice that with me every day.
No, that makes sense. I guess it really is all about balance. When to take the feedback and learn to be open to adapting versus like, no, this is what I am or what I'm doing at my core, and I don't want to change that.
Yeah, in learning how to be diplomatic about those things. I mean, publishing or filmmaking or whatever is an art, but it's a business. So, I'm sitting here on a 10-page editorial letter on my upcoming novel, and there's a few things in there I'm like, just like, but then I'm like, actually, I get it. This is a great piece of, this is a great insight. But it took me like 3 days to be like, okay,
right. I know what you mean.
And, you process and give yourself that grace.
You're allowed to,
experience those emotions, or that reader said what, right? And then just kind of process it through and learn from it in whatever that lesson is, and keep going. Don't let it, hold you down.
Yeah, that's pretty good advice, though. The balance is hard. I hear people talk about that a lot too. Knowing when to listen and when to stick to your guns about whatever it is that you're doing. It's true.
Yeah, it's hard, but you get there.
Yeah.
Or you don't, and you take off on Twitter and
that's right. That's right. Twitter.
Choice is yours, I guess. So
that's right. So the story that we're talking about specifically today is Trick or Treat, Alistair Gray. Which is what are the release dates for it?
So Trick or Treat, Alistair Gray will come out on audio and ebook August 16th, and then the paperback early September. Okay. And then we're still finalizing the film distribution part of it, but before Halloween, because otherwise that would be a fail. So making sure it's available for people to watch and enjoy for spooky season. I just don't know the actual release date yet.
Yeah. And without giving too much away, I really thought this was really cute. I'm glad that you were able to share it with me. It's a very cute story. As I mentioned, my 4-year-old was in love with it. And I wasn't sure, like when we started watching it and he saw the animation, he was like really intrigued. And I was like, I think this is fine. Like, I didn't really know.
I think this is probably okay. Yes.
But no, this is such a cute story. Like, I thought the story was really cute, and I'm actually really excited to get it, like to have it, like, because I plan on getting a physical copy of it when it's out. And I'm excited for other people to see it, because I think it's just this really cute little story. And I relate to him like so much, because I feel like that was how I felt as a kid going around. So without giving too much away, it's just a story about a little boy who is not looking for a silly Halloween. He wants a real Halloween. And that is pretty much how I feel every day of my life. Like,
right. Can you take this more seriously, please?
Yes.
Yeah, it Trick or Treat, Alistair Gray is so near and dear to my heart, and it's so different than anything else I've ever worked on, because Alistair, the whole thing began as a poem that I kind of wrote my son when my son was 4, or so years old.
Yeah.
Because, my family is directly Celtic. We are from Scotland. You can see the Braveheart hair that I'm constantly messing with. Like, we have this whole thing. And so, being of that heritage, we really embrace some of those old traditions and old customs. I mean, my grandparents had just come over, like, so this is like not like along in the history, like they're still part of my family. How we celebrate Halloween traditions, and how we kind of engage in some of those different cultural moments throughout the year, which
Yeah.
is very different than, a lot of other people. So
Sure.
while we're decorating, like really embracing the spooky and having dumb suppers and, putting out bread for the dead and doing all these things, everyone else is like, walking around in superhero outfits, focused on candy. My son is like, what is happening? Like, and it's like, I promise, like, I'm a spooky person, by nature, but I'm not
Sure.
trying to be common weird and like traumatize my kid. Like,
Right.
customs and things we do come from, these places of tradition and history and family. And so I wrote Alistair just kind of as a way to try to teach that, or try to share that lesson. There's more than one way to celebrate this holiday. There's more than one way to enjoy the spirit of the season, just like for every other, large holiday. Huge diversity and variety in how people, celebrate those moments in their lives and what they attach to them spiritually and mentally and, culturally. So it started out that way. And then I was on the PTA board for my son's elementary school, and I dealt with cultural art, since I brought in authors for author visits, or I brought in assemblies and other, those fun stuff that you get to do in elementary school that I really miss doing. So I needed to be on the board so I could do them again, like scholastic book fairs. Like, that's my jam. Yeah, right. So it just, that little poem that I had written as a bedtime exercise grew and grew and grew into this story. It was really, had been workshopped a lot, and a lot of feedback, and a lot of those learning moments developing, because I don't necessarily write for children.
Sure.
And it just became Alistair, who looks a lot like my son. In the book, Alistair is wearing a homemade mummy costume, which was one of my son's Halloween costumes. The year I wrote it or something. There's a picture. I did an interview with NPR, local NPR channel, a long time ago, and there's an picture on that interview of my son in his mummy Halloween costume. I would have given it to you, but I'm banned from ever showing that picture again after my now 15-year-old son.
Oh no!
Give that to the show. But then I asked a friend who's an illustrator to help me with some illustrations. I kind of had a specific, because this was really never meant to be a published project. It was just a family, thing. And then it just kept getting bigger and bigger, and we ended up with an illustrator, and then we ended up starting to have the conversation about animating it and making it a film, and then going to festival. And then suddenly we have this, lovely little 9-minute short that's amazing, and it's everything I could have dreamed it would be.
So cute.
And here we are.
I think the aesthetics are like perfect. Like, it just makes it even better. Like, like the way that it is drawn and the way that it's animated is just adds so much. And it very much like, and I'm sure you may have heard this before, but it very much reminds me of like a Nightmare Before Christmas, or like Tim Burton, or kind of Beetlejuicy, kind of like those kind of things. But it's its own completely unique thing. But it just has those little like nuances where you're just kind of like comfortable in this new story that you're reading. And it is really cute. And I love the illustrations, like all of the things that it, like, from the kids that we see to just everything. It was really, really cute. Like, I really liked it a lot. It's super well done. And you're friends with the person that animated it, or was it somebody that you already knew?
No, this thing was so cobbled together. It was so homegrown. When I wrote it, I was like channeling my inner Tim Burton for sure. Like, I really wanted Tim Burton, Lemony Snicket. That's another, I'm a huge fan of, like, Lemony Snicket.
I can see that too.
Neil Gaiman, Coraline, the Graveyard Book. Like, those were my kind of, like, not necessarily all of my childhood influences, but they like really influence like the storytelling, part of my brain and how I want to tell those stories. So when I wrote the book, it was just, the poem. And then when I started looking at illustrators, I said, I really want someone who I can say inspired by, like, a Tim Burton and a Lemony Snicket and a Beetlejuice all smushed together. I want something that's, like that, which is completely amorphous and nonsensical. And the illustrator, Tamia, was like, I got you. And she turned around those illustrations, and they were just absolutely phenomenal.
They are.
And at the time, we were not animating it, was not even like a daydream. So
Yeah.
had we known that, we could have done things a lot easier. My poor animator. But
Oh.
Camilla did the drawings. They were absolutely phenomenal. I think the only one that we ever like went back and forth on a little bit was the Sentinel character.
Sure.
Really getting him, that right on the edge of being scary, but
Yeah.
still being like, kind of cute. Like, I mean,
It's somewhere in between the two. Yeah,
like,
yeah.
we're trying to get him in there. And then getting Alistair right, who looks a lot like my son.
Yeah.
So,
That's cute. Yeah.
but the illustrations I thought were really amazing. They really captured kind of that ambience, and she did a really great job. I mean, of the kids in the back of the schoolroom.
Yes.
They're a very diverse group of children that want everybody reading to see
I
themselves.
noticed that too. Mm-hmm.
Even though with it only really two main characters, there's a lot going on in the background, and I want to make sure other kids saw themselves on the page, if not in the story.
Yeah.
So that came first, and then I started thinking about, we started looking into the production side. And so I reached out to my good friend, Mr. Sam Sheeran, who was a renowned horror artist based in the UK. He's done a tremendous amount of work on, like heavy metal art and just a bunch of really cool stuff. He's incredibly talented, and he's an artist of brilliant design. So it's kind of hysterical to go to a really incredible artist friend and be like, hey, so I already have an artist. That's not what I need. I want you to read this. Because if Christopher Lee and Vincent Price like had a love baby, it would be you. And I said, you've got, because he's British, he's got this like dark, gravelly but weirdly soothing, cadence that I thought just really paired well.
Yeah.
So Sam came in and did all of the audio voiceover work, and it was just beautiful. And then the animator, Dan Walters, is actually someone I've known for over 10 years. And he does a lot of video game animation. That's kind of his work is more in the gaming space. But I just know, we've known each other for so long. I knew I could say, hey, here's the script, here's the art, here's the media. Can we animate this? Can we make it into a proper cartoon? And he's got young kids. So we kind of looked at like Room on the Broom and the Stickman, like other kind of like real
animation like that. Yeah.
And then we also, of course, looked at the animation for The Nightmare Before Christmas. And I was like, kind of, there's all kinds of technical language he used in terms of like how this was done and what were, and that I know nothing about. But I said, I don't want it to be super flowy. Like I want there to be some stiltedness to it. I want there to be some mood, and he got to work too. And so everyone brought these incredible talents and these incredible visions that were all the same, but kind of different interpretations, but they all fit so well. So it's this, Franken cartoon of people bringing their best work together. And I think that's what makes Alistair Gray such a really fun project, and why it came home with like 13 awards from Film Festival. Everywhere from honorable mentions to grand prize winners, depending on the festival. But I think the reason it's resonated so well is that it's, the kids who've watched it really enjoy it. Yeah. The parents who've watched it enjoy it, so there's a lot of that mixed audience in there that are all being able to experience something special with Alistair, which was, my biggest dream. I'm very excited and very grateful.
Yeah, no, I think it's fantastic. And I think because of the main point of the story, I think like it really does drive home like this concept of diversity and what it means to look at these holidays, not just Halloween, but all of them, and how different people have these different thoughts or expectations of what that looks like. And I think like, I think that, Disney does this a lot, where they try to like, they give you, these things, these hidden things for parents to appreciate in these cartoons and these things. I think this is such an interesting balance that I don't know that any like age group is like left out of it, because I feel like it does kind of cater to like everything, like a stretch of people who are into horror that are adults that maybe don't even have kids that would still be able to watch it and appreciate it and fin it. And I think one of the things that I really loved about the animation is it reminds me of like, almost like puppets, like puppetry.
Mhm.
Like the movements are very like, that's what it reminded me of. And then I'm like I am a gamer, and one of my like favorite like games is Alice in Wonderland Madness Return to Madness. And there are scenes in the cutaway scenes for that movie, or I'm sorry, that game, that are like that are drawn in similar fashions or animated in similar like puppetry type ways. I just think it's such a cool thing that's not, I don't get to see a whole lot of. So I was thoroughly impressed with that. I thought it was awesome.
Awesome, because that is like one half complete accident and one half totally planned. I mentioned, had we known we were going to animate, we would have done the art differently. So when Tamia drew these are all drawn paintings. They're not they were not digitally done. So they were all hand done art. So when Dan, the animator, comes in, he's like, okay, I need all of, I don't know, insert language of animators here, like all these like pieces of components, these characters, so that he can move them. And I went back to Tamia, and I could just feel vibrations from Hungary. So we did, because we did flat drawings, so we had to go back and she had to kind of digitize them, and she had to piece them in ways so that, the animator could take an arm and do something with it. So that wasn't unintentional, and it made everyone's life miserable for a while.
Oh no.
Sorry. But I too, I wanted that little bit of like this jerkish movements, that the puppetry is great, and that may in fact be the function that I used, because that's but I wanted kind of that like dreamy quality, and I didn't really want like a smooth Disney-esque animation. So lucky for me, I forced that to happen by doing it,
by doing it that way.
But it worked. I mean, the way that those animations were done, I think you added so much, character, for lack of a better word, to the story. I agree. Yeah. So all of those things just came together in the music. It just all worked out really well. So to your point, I know I've had people who have read the book, children's librarians, elementary school teachers, all those early review crowds.
Oh yeah.
I'm waiting for someone to say it's too scary. And I did hear that when we kind of initially started shopping the project. We had some publishers that came back and said it was too scary. And I'm like, that's what those moments were like, I think you're wrong. Fine. Disagree. But, I've had little kids really enjoy it. And that was certainly my experience when I was reading it at elementary schools. But then adults who were just really, a little bit more horror minded, or have the nostalgia of, Halloween in the 90s or something. Like, it really, to me, kind of hits a lot of those notes. So there's something for everyone, hopefully, to enjoy.
No, I think so, for sure. Yeah. Is this the first thing that you've written that you've had like this type of like creative control over? I know you said like you've done you said you've done like, I think, screenwriting and things like that gets turned into, but like, is this like your first like everything project?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, because in screenwriting, you turn in a draft, you're going to get notes from everyone, and then it's going to change on the fly when they're filming, so there's just, when a script is written, it's not done until it's post-production, because, it happens everywhere. I did a romance movie last year called Aloha with Love, that aired on May 1st on Up TV. And it's kind of funny, if you look at this original screenplay and you look at the finished product that aired, like, there's so many differences, but everyone brings in, everyone becomes very invested, and everyone brings in their opinions and their experience, and ideas. And so it becomes a true collaboration, which is, sometimes amazing, sometimes infuriating, always interesting to experience. With Alistair, there were some parts of the story that were a little bit tweaked. A lot of like, this rhyme isn't working for me, or this isn't fitting right. One of my good friends, Sam Hooker, and we've actually just completed a middle grade horror, or middle grade spooky but not scary novel together. I can always count on Sam to give me some like brilliant 3-word combination.
Oh wow, okay.
And I remember calling him or having him read the draft. I'm like, this line isn't working. I don't know what to put here. I need something. And he shot back a very Hooker line, which is rattling chains. And I was like, rattling chains it is. And I think that's probably, he's got rattling chains in everything he's ever written, I'm sure. I think maybe because, he has some at home. He's very fond of rattling chains. I don't know. but it was a perfect line. So
Yeah.
just a little bit of that, you know, one of my agents suggested there's a line about werewolves on all fours, because I was, the original line was pluralization of horrors, which is such a difficult word to say or read or pronounce. So like, this isn't, I don't think this is the right end for this sentence. This is where I'm going to get that. This is where the reviews are going to hit, you know, of horror. You know, so bad. So there was some of that, you know, but in terms of like, you know, the overseeing the direction and having kind of like the you know, executive decision making power, it was the only one. But I really, I don't know what to me Dan and Sam would say, but I really tried not to wield that power, because I know that everyone coming in, you know, was so incredible at what they were doing that they were going to do it on their own way. You know, to me, like I said, we only really did a couple of pieces of art back and forth on one scene, with Sam and doing the voiceover work. I don't actually think that I gave him any notes. I think he nailed it, you know, really easily. And even with Dan, which was the animation process, was much more labor intensive. A lot of it was just getting it perfect. You know, it's, you know, here, what do we want to put? I'm like, oh, let's put some bats in there, you know? So
I know what you mean.
But it wasn't, but so it was one, but everyone kind of brought their stuff together, but I never felt like, that the you know, that the vision that I had for the project was compromised, and I never felt like I turned down anyone's ideas either. So I think we all worked as a team really well.
Yeah, and it sounds like too, because especially because you had pre-existing relationships, you had like a lot of trust, and you know, like, and that makes a huge difference with something as special as like a poem you wrote for your son. You're now turning into this like full-fledged thing. So
and I think that's, you know, the idea of trust is one that's really kind of hard to get your mind around. But I think, you know, when we talked about, you know, developing kind of that voice and that mechanism for listening and hearing as a creative, being able to have trust with people you work with, trust in your editors, trust in your agents, your publishers, your publicists, your, you know, whatever your team looks like one person does not birth art. One person maybe carries it, but everyone nurtures, you know, that baby along. So, I mean, I think my most exciting projects, even if not the most successful ones, my most exciting ones have been the ones that like I am, you know, got to work with people I really trust and value. And so I think that you have to kind of like, again, come out of the cave a little bit and build a network of people that you trust and respect and admire, and find ways to work together.
Yeah. And I think creatively, all of that's super important anyway, because when you're coming from different creative places, there's a lot more room for bumping of heads and like trying to navigate, like create, like being able to do what the goal is, but also bringing your own thing to it. So it sounds like you've done a pretty good balance. I think it turned out great. I think people are going to love this when it comes out.
Well, thank you. I'm a huge fan of it myself.
Yeah. So do you have other projects down the pipeline that you can talk about, or anything else that you have coming up besides?
Oh my gosh, always things going on for sure. So Alistair will come out August and September, in different form factors. In November, I have an anthology coming out called Into the Forest, which is a collection of tales from women in horror inspired by the Baba Yaga.
Nice. That's
so cool. That's been an incredible anthology to work on. We have 20 something stories in one poem in there, with a foreword by Christina Henry, who does not love Christina Henry. And then the contributors to this project are women in horror all over the world. So familiar names, like Gwendolyn Kais, Stephanie Wojtowicz, Sarah Tantlinger, and then you've got new names, new faces from women, you know, in Asia. And everyone's sharing in this, the Baba Yaga, that stories that we either grew up with or, you know, heard, you know, mutations of in different
many different ones.
So that's been an incredible project that comes out early November.
Okay.
You know, I know that I have something else and I'm completely forgetting it. But that's my next big thing is Into the Forest. So I'm very excited about that. And then I'm, you know, currently working. I have, you know, I have lots of projects out there. I have my debut pure horror novel coming out from St. Martin's Minotaur Books next year.
Nice.
So that's I'm currently working on that. So, a lot of things going on, mostly in the horror space.
That's good.
But yeah.
Cool. Well, I know you do a lot. Like I know I was trying to read about you and like learn, and I was like, there's no way if I were to like say all of these things, I would be able to remember them all. Like, do you have other hobbies that you get to make time for? Like, is it just or is all of this your hobbies and you just love it so much that it just takes up all of your time?
It's a lot of that. Honestly, and I'm a huge reader. I've always got my notes.
How do you find time to read?
I actually I force myself to read, and I recently started just recently, maybe last week, exclusively started reviewing for Rue Morgue. So I was reviewing for several different groups, but I'm reviewing for Rue Morgue exclusively now. So book reviews, and I'm doing a little bit I'm doing some interviews on some upcoming horror films. Cast and crew of those next week. So I try to combine like the film and writing world since I toggle so much. So reading luckily is a hobby, but one that I can actually I'm very opinionated and have lots of things to say about stuff. So writing book reviews works. I'm really a big fan of my dog. So my dog is usually always with me. He's actually banging on the door because I locked him out. So hopefully
the nerve.
God damn, so I this dog. And I quilt.
Oh, okay.
I'm really quilting. Yeah,
it's a lot.
But again, sometimes you just want to sit down and space out. So I can just plop down in front of my sewing machine and turn the movie on, or put an I do a lot of audiobook listening. So I have like a terrible problem with multitasking. I'm trying to learn to do one thing and one thing only at a time.
I get that. That's a struggle for me too. Yeah,
it's real. We can ride that struggle bus together, because I am never gonna be able to master it, I guess. So I'm probably reading. If I'm not writing or reading, I'm probably listening to something while I'm, sewing, or hanging out with my dog.
Yeah, that's cool. Well, I just have one more thing that I ask everybody that comes on, and then and we can wrap up. What's your favorite scary movie? You can do a runner-up if you need to.
I don't know. Not my favorite movie, but I watched 13 Ghosts again. Did you ever see 13 Ghosts?
The original or the new one, the remake? Well, the remake came out like over a decade ago, but it's an old movie too. Like there's like an older one.
I'm probably talking about the remake.
With Matthew Lillard.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. It's not my favorite horror movie, but I rewatched it randomly over this past weekend, and I was like, it's not scary to me anymore. I remember I saw it in theaters when it came out.
Sure.
And I remember being like, "Ooh!" It's like the girl in the bathtub, like that scene, the angry princess or whatever.
The princess,
Of course, I had just seen The Ring, or would soon see The Ring, and so the whole maybe wet girl thing, it was one of my biggest phobias.
I got you.
But we watched it again this past weekend, and it kind of held up.
It does hold up. The practical effects and the usage of lighting and atmosphere. No, it definitely holds up. I agree.
The cinematography was pretty impressive. And then you're thinking it was maybe 99 or 2000. It was right there. So it's so that is my answer, wiggling out of your actual question. I have no idea. I probably one of my favorite horror movies ever is The Shining, the Stanley Kubrick version. I've been watching it since I was 5 or something, and so I recognize there's flaws. I recognize there's vast differences between the multiple film versions in the book. I just have a deep appreciation for the director, for the actors in that movie, and it just kind of was very fundamental.
Yeah.
So, actually, I'm writing with my Shining pen. Just some goopy blood stuff going on.
Oh my God, I love it.
Ever.
Yeah.
Well, if we're digging deep to fundamental favorites,
sure,
that might be one. But that's an impossible question, I think, to ask a horror person.
Yeah, I get asked that a lot, and I've also had to make lists a lot. And what I usually do is I just answer it without thinking about it, and then I just admit that the answer is probably going to change the next time I'm asked.
Yeah, if you ask me in 5 minutes, I'll tell you something. I'll tell you how much I don't like The Shining.
Right.
It's gonna whatever pops out the moment. But I thought I just watched I just watched that older movie over again, and I was kind of surprised that it still held up. Another one.
No, it's a good one.
Hold up scenes is that intro scene in Ghost Ship around that same time.
Yes, that is to date my favorite horror movie opening of all time. Like that,
So good.
It's nuts. It's like I watched another, like it's called Sky Shark. So just to show you how not serious that movie is, but they do a scene and like it's very similar to that, except it's not on a boat or a ship. But I just like I'm thinking in my head like they just ghost shipped that whole situation. Like 'cause I immediately like. Oh, that scene is terrifying. I love that. That's a good one too.
That's a great opening. And I'm hugely obsessed with sailing and ocean water.
Oh, okay.
My old historical project I told you about was a pirate one, you know, so like I'm really I spend a lot of time on the water. So it's like one like totally made me terrified of going on cruise ships, and then simultaneously made me desperate to go on a cruise ship. Like, balance, right? I guess
the life of a horror fan.
It's like I want to be zipped through, you know, by a mast cable on a cruise ship and slide apart. Like, just such an epic opening scene.
It is epic. It's definitely one that you don't forget after you've seen it. That's true. Yeah.
A lot of love for that opening. So there we go. Favorite horror movies for 11:52 a.m.
Well, cool. Well, thank you, Lindy, for taking time again. I really do appreciate it. This was a fun conversation. I'm really excited for the release for you because I think it's going to be a massive hit. I think it's really cute. It's a great story. I think it's going to speak to a lot of people. So I'm excited.
Well, thank you. I love that you loved it and that you loved it. And I can't to have a copy. I've gotten to hold of, you know, we had to use a special paper. There's just so much ink on this book. Right. So, you know, we went through a couple different papers and I got to hold it, the galleys when they came in, and they're just beautiful. So I can't wait for them to be in hands for, you know, late night Halloween reading this year.
Yeah, that's exciting. Yeah, I'm excited for you. Okay, cool. Well, I won't keep you too much longer. Thanks again. And I'll put all of Lindy's information in the description for the video below so you can find her and follow her so that you'll be notified so you can check out when Trick or Treat Alistair Gray comes out. Cool. All right. Well, I'll let you get back to your day. I know you're just starting your day. My day's like ending. So
it's time to wake up, I guess, and get to work.
All right. Well, have a good rest of your day.
Thank you so much.
All right. Thanks.
Happy Halloween.
Happy Halloween. That's right. Bye. So that was my filmmaker conversation with Lindy Ryan. Alistair Gray is very, very cute. I think a lot of people are really going to like it. I'm very serious about making sure that you follow her so that you can get notified when it comes out, as well as her other projects. That Baba Yaga anthology sounds awesome. Women in horror are fantastic. So I'm super excited to check that out. Thank you guys so much for hanging out with us. Hope you have a good rest of your week. Enjoy your weekend, and I will see you in the next one.